Give you some space, man. Hello, hello. Oh, let's give it up for the band. Amen. And the folks in the kitchen, I mean, it takes a lot to get these going. It really does. I'm learning that the hard way. You know, we're starting one at City Hills Church off Paper Mill, and we're in the process of, getting volunteers. And it does take a lot to get this going. Well, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol. My name's Jason. That song really got me emotional. 5 years ago, my first step class I did, because 5 years ago, I was just finished step 3. And I was at the car wash, and I was vacuuming out my truck, had the doors open. I had that song right there just blaring. And every time I hear that song, I tear up. I don't deserve nothing. What I deserve is, life in prison, or honest to God, that's where I should be, or in the ground. But, thank God that He loved me enough to pull me out of the ocean, because I was drowning bad. Let me get started. Yeah, that song really gets me. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank God and the church for allowing me to be here tonight. Truth be told, I should be dead or life in prison for the things my addiction took me. For the first 36 years of my life, I did everything possible to run from my fears, insecurities, and most of all, myself. But God had His own plan for me. The thing is, God never left me, I left Him. I was born August the 12th, 1974. At the time, my parents were married, and I had an older sibling, 18 months older than me. I really don't have any memories of my parents being together or any family events with them as a child. They were divorced by the time I was 4 or 5. My father was an alcoholic and running from his own problems, and my mother, well, she was on her way as well. By the time I was in first grade, it became worse for my mother. The guy she dated after my father left was a complete disaster. The drug and alcohol-infused fights became a common occurrence. Being woke up in the middle of the night, hearing dishes being broke, the yelling and screaming terrified me. I'd just lay there and shake, crying myself back to sleep. Going to school the next morning, still terrified, all this took a toll on me. I couldn't concentrate in school. It was like I even wasn't there. About this time, the emotional and physical abuse started. Just out of nowhere, we would get beat by a leather belt and sent to our room. It was so bad at times, the next day, just sitting at the desk, it would just hurt so bad. Let me see. I started to blame myself for my mother's actions and thinking maybe if I wasn't here, she wouldn't be this way. This led me being held back in 2nd and 3rd grade. My grandparents did all they could to help me. They paid for special tutoring and sent me to a private Christian school. Now I feel out of place. Doing 3rd grade over again when I should be in 5th, starting a new school and being a foot taller than my other classmates, I felt like I was never going to fit in. The school was what I needed. I learned about God in the Bible, and I did much better in my schoolwork. Time moves on, and about the age of 12, during Christmas vacation, I was involved in my first alcohol-related car wreck. My face was cut up real bad, and I remember that day like it was yesterday. This was the first time I really reached out to God. There was an older kid, about 17 or so, that helped me get out of the car. He was carrying me, and all I wanted to say to him was put me down so I can pray. But I didn't say anything. I was ashamed of what he would think of me, so I just prayed in silence. Going back to school was hard on me. Here again, being a foot taller, and now my face all cut up, kids would really stare at me. Am I ever going to fit in anywhere? I keep thinking to myself. I would spend my weekends and summers with either my grandparents or my cousins just to get away from my mother. Time moves on, and now I'm buried in shame and guilt, but now I've found the answer to my problems. At about the age of 14, I was introduced to marijuana. I found my new friend. I could numb out and not feel anything, and now I felt like I was fitting in. Hanging out after school with older kids, I started getting into trouble. At the age of 15, I was charged with drinking under the age and lost my privileges to drive until I was 18, but that didn't stop me from driving. The summer of me being 15, my dad out of nowhere calls and wants me to come stay the summer with him. I was so excited I finally got to spend some time with him. Little did I know that he had other plans for me. I flew down to Atlanta. As soon as I got there, I was given $50,000 in a car to drive to Houston, Texas to pick up 100 pounds of marijuana. I left the next day with some coked out woman just to have somebody ride with me. I made 2 trips to Texas that summer. Now I get a taste of the fast money. During that summer, not only was I using marijuana, I used cocaine as well. I could stay high all day and forget everything that ever happened to me with my mother. But it went just as fast as it came. My dad wasn't much of a role model, as you can see. Neither was my mother. Long story short, things went south quickly. The people we were buying from were under investigation, and the heat was coming down on us. My dad packed up and went to Florida, and I came back home. Now I'm in my sophomore year, now going to a public school. Partying has become an every weekend thing for me. I started to drink more and more, and I became a different person. I could forget my past with drugs and alcohol and didn't have to feel anything. I started selling again just so I could have some money. The abuse from my mother was still happening, but I was too old for her to whip me. She turned to other ways. One time I was sprayed with a mace just out of nowhere. My anger started about this time as well. I would get drunk and get into fights not knowing why I would do it. One fight I remember, I was jumped by a group of guys and I was losing, so I jumped in my car and hit one of them. I heard later that I broke his leg. By the end of my senior year, I had a son on the way. I finished high school, and soon after, I finally able to get my driver's license, but that didn't last long. I had plans on going to the Air Force, and that didn't happen either. By 19, I had my first DUI. I was court ordered to attend AA meetings. I was sitting in the meetings thinking to myself, I'm not like these people. I can stop at any time. But I was just like them, just a younger version. I had built a wall of denial around me and didn't even know it. When my son was born on September 2nd of '93, I barely remember it. I showed up at the hospital drunk, and after my son was born, I just wanted to get to the truck so I can have another drink. What beers I had left, I put them in the overnight bag and walked into the hospital. My drug and alcohol use never slowed up. To this day, I don't know how I finished probation from the first DUI I had. I would work all day, drink all night, not getting home till late and in the night, not remembering most times how I drove home, and do it again the next day. Maybe taking a day off from drinking just so I didn't have to hear it from my son's mother. A few years passed, and my second son is on his way. He was born December 2nd of '96. Again, same as before, I'm sneaking alcohol in the hospital. I passed out that night, again not remembering much about my son's birth. Nothing much changes during this time. I follow my normal routine, work all day, drink all night. There was a few times where I would just stay out all night, waking up on someone's couch with a busting headache, trying to think of some excuse to tell the kid's mother why I didn't make it home the night before. There were many times I was kicked out, but I always manipulated my way back in. I promise I'll never do it again. I promise I'll come straight home from work. I'd come home all right, but I wouldn't be empty-handed. I would stop by the store and pick up a 12-pack and go home. I would hang out with my neighbor and continue to do what I wanted, and that was to numb out my feelings and escape from reality. Time moves on, and I continued the pattern of my addiction. In the spring of '98, we found out I had another baby on the way. My daughter was born January 12th of '99, which she's watching right now from Florida. I found out y'all was live streaming, so I was texting her real quick, so she's watching right now. Hello, baby Kaylee. Frankie and Gracie, I love you. And you would think I would want to be sober for my daughter's birth, but I wasn't. Again, sneaking alcohol in the hospital, I continued my normal routine. It wasn't long after my daughter's birth I was introduced to painkillers. Now I've really found the answer to my problems. I started out just a few on weekends, and not long, it was an everyday occurrence for me. My disease of addiction was taking over my life, yet I'm still in denial. Not long after my daughter was born, I was in another car wreck. The neighbor and I went out one night, closed down the bar. I let my buddy drive my truck. On the way home, we ran off the road and hit a telephone pole head on. Next thing I know, I woke up in the hospital with a dislocated hip. I didn't drink for a while I was recovering, but soon after, I was back at it again. By the end of '99, my kid's mom had had enough. I remember that day. Actually, Jamie's watching it too, my kid's mother. So hello, Jamie. I remember that day. She told me that she loved me, but not in love with me anymore, and she was moving on with her life. It devastated me. It broke me like nothing ever before. I had bought a house, was adding another 800 square foot to it, just so it had enough room for our big family, but she didn't want no part of it. The house I thought was going to be a new start for us quickly became a hideout from reality. Wasn't long I was involved in another wreck in a company truck, and I was being prescribed painkillers. Now I didn't have to go out and find them. I had an endless supply. At least I thought I had. I was going through 250 hydros every week. I used the pain pills to kill my emotional pain and to numb out from the reality I had lost my family. Pills and alcohol was my best friend. I lost my job, and I started selling the pills to pay the bills. Again, I thought I could cut back at any time, but that was the lie I just kept telling myself. Like yesterday, I remember when I was introduced to Oxys. It was a small little pink pill that changed my life forever. For just a tiny pill, it had a huge punch. Now I didn't have to take 15 or 20 pills a day. I can only take 2 or 3. I lost my job, my family, and now I'm losing control of myself. But yet, I'm still telling myself I'm good. I can stop at any time. I'm not the problem, they are. Taking the pills by mouth wasn't doing it for me anymore. I was now snorting 4 or 5 little pink pills a day. My habit was growing more and more each day. Within 6 months, the 20 milligram pills went to the 3 or 4 80 milligram pills a day. I couldn't go just a few hours until I needed my next fix. I didn't want to live, but I didn't want to die either. I was stuck in my addiction. I knew by this point I needed to do something. I tried to go into detox one time, but checked myself out within a few days. I had someone pick me up and went straight to get my fix. I was sick of being sick, so I just gave in to my addiction. It was full steam ahead by this point. I was on a mission to numb out my emotional pain, and I wouldn't stop at nothing to finish my mission. Started mixing cocaine with Special K with my pills, drinking till morning till night. Along with my addiction, I had an anger problem as well. The day that the world changed, so did I. I was in my lawyer's office just about to head to court when the Twin Towers were hit. I was charged with aggravated kidnapping, aggravated robbery, and aggravated assault. Now I'm looking at 15 to 20 years. I was on my way to turn myself in, but the courts were closed due to the 9/11 attack. The next day I went and bonded out the same day. I gave up the pills and started to go into the methadone clinic. I thought I was getting myself help, but I just traded one for the other. Just as I did with the pills, I did with the methadone. I started selling to pay the bills. I really didn't get high off of it, so I started taking Xanax on top of my drinking. One thing I always told myself, I wasn't going to be absent from my kids like my dad was. I had my kids every chance I got to prove to myself, prove to myself I'm not like my father was. I was there with my kids, but I wasn't. Still looking not to feel anything, the addiction took over once again. My kids saw things and been places that no child should ever see. But in my sick mind, at least I'm not absent in their lives like my father was. Long story short, the charges were dropped against me and the race is on again. I'm playing God in my life and I am unstoppable. From this point on, back full steam ahead, back full steam again. From 2002 to 2004, I had multiple arrests from DUIs, driving on revoke, possession, casual change, firearm charges, going to child support nonstop. Most of my charges were dropped. I think I'm around 32 misdemeanors at this point. And I seem to get my way out of most of them, only doing little probation. I never had any jail time or probation violations. In 2004, I was involved in a drug deal that went bad. I was in the front seat of a car, and some guy pulled a gun on me trying to rob me. The hothead I was, I told the guy he better shoot me before I take the gun away. In the middle of the struggle, the gun went off, and I was shot 6 inches below my armpit, went straight through me without hitting anything. Clean shot. We were driving down the road, and after I was shot, I jumped out of the car doing about 40 miles an hour. I rolled and rolled on the pavement, and that hurt worse than being shot. I really didn't know I was shot until I felt the warm blood running down my side. I ended up going to the ER and went straight to jail afterwards for missing the court date the week prior. And you think this will be the turning point, but it only made it worse. I had dug a hole so deep in my addiction, I popped up in China. Nothing changes from this, and I get deeper and deeper in my addiction. I'm selling thousands of pills a month and doing about the same. This lasts till summer of '09. By the way, my kids moved to Florida in 2007, and after that, I was lost without them. Like I said before, I always had my kids on weekends, and now they're 800 miles away. So that summer, I went down to pick them up, but in the meantime, I get another DUI in Cape Coral with them in the car leaving the beach. You know, you ever heard the phrase, go on vacation, leave on probation, go back on violation? That was me. I didn't go back on violation, but I should have violated. I would have got a free trip down there and all that. So, no, that's not a good idea. I paid an attorney and told him I wouldn't be back, so do what you do. After all these years, I'm finally able to get my driver's license back. I'm within weeks of all these court dates, and I get my driver's license just days before I have court in Tennessee and Florida. And the DUI in Florida gets dropped to reckless driving, and all my driving on revoke get dismissed in Tennessee. See, I'm doing a good job playing God in my life. I get myself out of about any trouble I get myself into until August 27th of '09. I hadn't been home long, just a few days from taking the kids back to Florida, and about 2 in the afternoon, I hear a big bang. The next thing you know, my bedroom was full of green men pointing guns at me, yelling, "Let me see your hands." Finally, it's over, I'm thinking to myself. You see, I didn't know how to stop selling drugs nor using them. Rehab and detox wasn't an option for me. I was so deep in my addiction, I wasn't going to stop, but God intervened. One's desperation is a gift. At the time, I didn't think about it that way, but today I'm grateful for the person that wore a wire on me. Let's go back a few months before I was raided. I was pulled over many times, and they would search my truck and let me go. And at the time, I didn't have a driver's license yet. They would just say, get a ride or take off walking. So I waited till they left and jumped back in the truck and took off. At times, when I was out running around, I had a gut feeling that I was being watched, but I just kept on with my normal routine. Back to the day, I kept everything I had in a safe about the size of a refrigerator. It was a big old safe. So I knew if they couldn't get in the safe, they didn't have anything on me. They asked me for the code, but I refused to give it to them. That was a bad idea. It was like 90 outside. This is in August. It was like 90 outside, and they put me in the back of the police cruiser and rolled up the windows and turned on the heat. I lasted about 10 minutes, and I finally gave in. The next thing I hear, we've got him. After that, I'm on my way to jail. I bonded out that night. When I get home, the house was turned upside down. The place was a mess. My bathroom door was in the tub. Everything was turned upside down. About a week later, I heard a knock on the door. 2 more cops at the door with another warrant for my arrest. This time it was theft charges from the stolen guns I had. Out of 23 guns, I had 4 stolen guns. So I'm back in jail, but yet again I bonded out that night. I was charged with 10 selling deliveries, 6 of them were in a school zone, and 4 counts of theft. You think that this would be my breaking point, but it wasn't. I still went on with my insanity. I had to keep selling drugs in order to pay my attorney. Now it's December, and my kids are coming up for Christmas. It was December 17th, and I'm at the airport picking up the kids, and I got a phone call from the neighbor saying the cops were out there looking for me. Now I have 5 sealed indictments on me with a $250,000 bond. I'm not going to make this bond, I kept telling myself. I called the bondsman anyways and told him about it, what was going on, and he said he would do it for $10,000. But if I did, the DA would come at me again with more charges, so it was just best if I stayed in. Well, that wasn't an option for me, I told him. He said, just make sure you make it to your court dates or I'll be after you. Long story short, I made it about 8 months until my trial. That was September 19, 2010. I was even late for my court date because I stopped and sold drugs on the way. I was like 20 minutes late. It was the insanity. I was more addicted to the money just as much as the drugs and the lifestyle. I made a plea deal on November the 18th for 3 to 5 on the school zones and 3 years on the theft charges, running consecutive, which means you're doing one sentence before you start the other. The day I was sentenced, I thought to myself, my life was over. I remember the judge saying, I sentence you to 8 years in Department of Corrections, and the gavel hit the desk, bang. My heart dropped to the floor, and yes, my life was over, my old life. God had a plan for me, and I didn't even know it. I got to prison December the 1st, 2010. The next day was my middle son's birthday. I felt like a complete failure. I broke down and cried, what have I done? I would say to myself. About the second year, I started reading the Bible, thinking back to when I was at the Christian school where I learned about God and all the Bible stories. My time was getting easier for me. I would go to church and read the Bible every chance I had. I could feel that God was working in me. I went up for parole January of 2014, and I made it. I finally had a release date of June the 14th. Finally, I know when I'm getting out. A lot had happened in the 4 years while I was in prison. My grandmother went to a nursing home, and both my mother and stepdad passed away. I had no choice but go to a halfway house in Murfreesboro. I had no choice to go to a halfway house. I didn't want to go back to Knoxville, so I decided to go to Murfreesboro. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I wasn't going to go back to the way I was before, my old ways. God has made me a new person inside and out. I have lost over 80 pounds in the 4 years, and I had God in my heart. 2 Corinthians 5:17 tells us, therefore, if anyone in Christ, the new creation has come, the old ways have gone, the new is here. And Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, declare the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. Here I'm about to turn 40 and starting a new life. The thing is, you don't have to leave prison the same way you came in. I truly believe going to prison was all of God's plan for me, and I'm grateful for it. Prison put me in timeout, but it didn't help me with the shame and guilt that I was still carrying around. Kindly made it worse. I have all these titles hovering over my head. I'm a drug addict, alcoholic, and now I'm labeled by the state a career criminal. And people look at you differently. You know God doesn't. God seen the good in me. God puts people in your life for a reason. It may not be long, but you cross paths with them. Back in high school, I dated Sheila, my girlfriend now, for a few weeks. It didn't work out, and that's when I met my kid's mother. And 20 plus years later, Sheila and I found each other on Facebook. We reunited on our 21-year class reunion. September 19th, 2010, the day before I went to trial, I told my grandmother that I was going to prison and didn't know if I ever see her again. I told her I loved her, and the next day I'm off to jail. It was 4 years to that exact date I reunited with both of them, September 19, 2014. It was one of the best moments of my life. My grandmother didn't even recognize me. She yelled. I went up to her at the nursing home and tapped her on the shoulder, and she freaked out. She's like, "Who are you?" And I told her, "It's Jason Boy, Granny." I thought I'd never see her again. The smile on her face was priceless. She passed away not long after, and I'm slowly going back to my old ways with the alcohol. And that's when Sheila gave me a choice. Either you get help or I'm leaving. I've been through this before, and I learned from my mistakes. So I asked her, "What do you want me to do?" "You need to go to Celebrate Recovery." I never heard of it. So I went just to make her happy. She never said that I couldn't have a drink before I went. So I would stop at the store on my way and sit in the back and try to hide from everyone and jet out just as fast as I came in. After a few weeks, I really started listening to the message, and I knew that I had a problem, and I kept coming back. Slowly, I would move up a few rows each week. I signed up for step class and started working on myself, something I've never done before. The steps helped me realize that my drug and alcohol use was just symptoms of much deeper issues I have, and it's not over. I'm working on my 5th step class now. God didn't tear down the walls just so I could build a fence. The 30-plus years of my self-destruction isn't going away overnight, and it's going to be a lifelong marathon for me, not a sprint. Celebrate Recovery has saved my life, and I've finally found where I fit in, and I'm not alone here. Again, one's desperation saved my life. If it wasn't for Sheila's desperation for me to change, I would never be where I'm at now. With God's help and Celebrate Recovery, my life has really changed a lot. The God I serve never left me, I left him. Psalms 107, 13 and 14 says, "They cried to the Lord in their troubles, and he rescued them. He led them from the darkness and the shadows of death and snapped their chains." God would never waste a hurt, but he can't use it unless you step into the light. Today, I can say I've made amends to my family and most of all my kids. Not only do I have my 3 kids, but I've been blessed with a stepson that I love just as much, and I've also been blessed with 2 grandchildren. Matthew 10:39 says, "If you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give your life to me, you will find it." God has given me a new life. My passion for Christ and Celebrate Recovery, God has called me into ministry. I'm one of the ministry leaders at City Hills Church that I'm involved in bringing another Celebrate Recovery to Knoxville. See, God has His own plan for me, and God had His own plan for me way before I can even talk. But I was in the way. Philippians 3:13 tells us, "No, dear brother, I am still not what I all should be, but I'm bringing all my energies to bear one thing, forgetting my past and looking for what lies ahead." Thank you all. I like to say something. I want to say something about being powerless. You know, I did step classes, and I understand I'm powerless over my addictions. You know, I have no power when I take drugs and alcohol. It goes out the way. But I found out back in October that I had a tumor in my head. You know, and when I found that out, you're talking about powerless. There's nothing I could do about it. I mean, I had to give it over to God. You know, when a doctor sits right in front of you and tells you you have a tumor in your head, it's all you hear, and it's like wah, wah, wah after that. But I have a tumor on my left ear, on my acoustic nerve. It's pressing up against my brain. But Tuesday, I'm going to Vanderbilt for my surgery. So I'd like for everybody to pray for me. You know, God gives you signs. He really does. You know, yesterday morning, y'all hear the thunderstorm yesterday morning? Well, exactly 5:30 in the morning, I heard a big bang. It was thunder and lightning. I woke up, and at nighttime I listen to sermons at night because my ear rings so bad. I got to hear something that drives me crazy. But exactly at 5:30 yesterday morning, I woke up, and all I heard was, "I'm with you." And I have to be at the hospital next Tuesday at 5:30 in the morning. So God, if you'll open your eyes and your ears, God will send you little signs. And last night at Celebrate Recovery in Fountain City, the church prayed over me. Everybody prayed over me. And I was sitting in a place where I normally don't see it. And they have windows, and there was just a small little opening, and the light shined right on top of me. And the light was just on me alone. So it's just another sign that I've got from God that everything's going to be okay. Amen. But you know, we're going to have storms. We're going to have trials. You know, Philippians 6:10-18 tells us, you know, we put on the helmet of salvation, the chest of righteousness, you know, the belt of truth. You know, it gives us a sword, you know, the word of God. We don't have to, God gives us the strength to fight these storms. But, you know, it never says anything about having anything on your back, no armor, because God has your back. You know, when God designed animals, you know, a cow would just sit in a storm. A buffalo will run through the storm. You know, be the buffalo. Let God push you. Let God be your strength to fight these storms, because you're not alone. So anybody out here tonight that's fighting a storm, that wants to start or restart the program and need a little help from God, I'd like to offer you this blue chip. Is anybody willing to start or restart the program? Anybody? All right. I don't know if y'all have a small group, but they offer me to get a small group there, so I don't know. But I thank you all for having me. I love each and every one of you all. Thank you.